Hey everyone! I'm going to share with you some parts of a new painting I'm doing. I have a panel with a grid, and that is my reference. It's actually very similar to an older painting I've done from 2013, and that's when this reference was taken. I'm just going to create another painting that's a bit similar. So I'm going to get started on this underpainting here and then proceed with the colors. I'm using Gamsol to dissolve the burnt sienna. It makes it the consistency kind of like watercolor, and it just is a very thin, transparent layer, as you guys probably already know, unless this is the first time you're watching one of my demos. But the underpainting basically helps me establish some tonal value and some shapes right off the bat. I don't really like to paint on blank white canvases. I used to, but once I've discovered underpaintings, my life just got so much better. So that's just what I've been doing ever since. I don't really see myself painting on blank anymore, unless it's like maybe a sketchbook study, because I don't care as much about those. I don't really care about making those perfect. They're more just for fun. But the mirror is obviously going to have some water droplets, which I'm not going to focus on those details in the beginning of the underpainting. That's going to happen later into the piece once it comes to the final details and all the little things that make the painting awesome and fun to paint. But it was kind of weird to paint this angle because like I normally do portraits or even faces in water, and so this like weird angle of just the chin and the mouth and then the mirror and the hand, like it's not, you know, super easy to paint. So definitely the grid definitely helped. I probably could have done it without it, just had to repaint a bunch of stuff over and over again, but I like to just spare myself that trouble and save myself some time and use a grid. And I always wait for the underpainting to dry a little bit after working on it, so I'll give it either a few hours or I'll come back to it the next day, because then at that point it is perfectly dry and you're not going to pick up any of the underpainting when you layer the oil paint over it, and it just works. So in this case I let it dry like a day before going back. Whenever I started with the blank white canvas, it was always the challenge, like the biggest challenge for me and my least favorite part of the process. Although I love the entire painting process, but like when you have nothing and just putting some paint on the canvas is very intimidating and just kind of scary. But now that I do an underpainting, like I get one of the problems out of the way, which is the shapes and some of the tonal values. So once that's out of the way, the color part seems less intimidating because I have more of a map of where I'm going to put them. I just have this underpainting with all the shapes ready for me. So that's basically why I do it. And now I'm just kind of laying down colors on my palette. As you can see, my palette just has so much dried paint on it. It's honestly because I'm just kind of lazy. I don't want to scrape it up. It's kind of annoying to do every time. So a lot of times I'll just leave the colors on my palette and let them dry, and then just build on top of them until it gets to the point where it's just ridiculous, and then I clean it. So we're getting to the point where soon it will be ridiculous, but apparently according to my standards we're not quite there yet. So we're still working with some dried paint on my palette. I'm not using a palette knife for this. Obviously it's a much smaller painting, and I'm fine with just using my brushes to mix. And honestly, I kind of haven't been using my palette knife for some of the larger pieces too, because this month has been so crazy, so the paint would just dry on my palette. Like I feel like mixing all those colors in bulk is great if you're just going to use them all at once, but that wasn't the case for me. I'd like mix the colors and then I would get distracted or have to switch to some other task, or something else would happen preventing me from continuing the painting. So that was a problem, but yeah, we're just gonna mix with brushes this painting. So first color I'm mixing, I'm taking some Caucasian flesh tint. That's literally the color of the tube. So that's gonna be mixed with some cadmium lemon and a little bit of titanium white. There we go with the cadmium lemon. And this is for some parts of the chin, some of the lighter parts. They are actually going to be painted over with a color that's slightly closer to the pink side, but just for a start, this was a good color to begin with. So I'm getting some of that chin area covered, at least the lighter parts, and then slowly I'm just gonna build the colors as I go, and you'll see this palette fill up completely into a disaster, which is kind of fun to see. I almost want to do a palette time lapse completely by itself and make a YouTube video entirely about that, so we'll see. I do have enough palette footage, so that's for sure. So now I'm taking some burnt umber and I'm adding some cadmium red light to it and burnt sienna, and then some of the flesh tint color, and just combining all that with a little bit of cadmium lemon as well. And this is for a little bit of the shadow that's on the chin. It was kind of hard to get this to look right, and you'll see it starts to look like a mess, and just ignore later on, not right now, but I will start painting the hands very soon, and it's gonna look terrible, so just bear with me. Like, trust me, I have all those same thoughts in my head as I'm painting. I'm just like, wow, this is so bad, like how am I gonna get through this? But if you just keep on going and you just go with the flow and put the colors where you see them, slowly the piece will come together and look much better. So I'm just using that color to place into other parts of the chin. You can always just skip back to the reference, or I'll just put it up on the screen somewhere to make your life easier, which is probably what I'll do. So I'm adding some more cadmium red light, and there's parts in the chin shadow, like on the bottom of the jawline, where it actually fades from green to brown, and there's like a little bit of red in the transitional part of that shadow, which I notice is very common with some flesh tone shadows. Like, it goes from brown and then it doesn't just fade into peach. Like, there's a bit of a warm color in that shadow transition, which you will see me paint. Just trying to kind of like explain my reasoning there. But now we're moving on to the hands, and again using those same colors, cadmium lemon, flesh tint, and titanium white, and that color is like too dark, so I stopped and then brought it into some parts of the chin, and I'm just brightening it up a bit with titanium white, and then going back to the chin. And the colors on the reflection in the mirror are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be slightly greener because it's a different angle, a different light source, and it's interesting to create that. I definitely want to do more paintings kind of playing with reflections, maybe not exactly like this, but similar concept. I really enjoyed it. So I'm taking some cadmium red light and cadmium lemon and adding titanium white, and I'm making this like much warmer reddish color, and this is going in the lips. And of course I tweak this color gradually. I'm just placing something to lay down, and I can already see how proportionally it's off, but I will fix that later. It also helps to like take pictures of your art as you're working, and it shrinks it down and gives you a perspective that you kind of don't get for some reason if you see it in person. I don't know why that is, but I guess it's just once you're used to seeing it a certain way, like seeing a little picture of it kind of changes things. So the color in the lips right now is a little bit too orange, and in a little bit I'm just going to bring some alizarin crimson in here, but it is good to just have something down there because it looked so weird without it. So yeah, I was trying to poke into some of my dried alizarin crimson, and then I went for the burnt umber to build on some of the shadows on the right side of the lips, which are away from the light source. And any second now I'm going to bring in a little tube of alizarin crimson because it does need to have a little bit more of like a pink tone, and currently it's a bit on the orange side, but I'm just, using what colors I can where I see them, trying to get some shadows established, going back to the flesh color, adding some of the redder color, and building shadow underneath the lip shadow, kind of creating that transition into the lighter skin colors. And then going into the more browner tones and combining it, and just trying to soften the area, the shadows around the lips. And I am using pretty small brushes for this. I don't really need anything ginormous. It's a little painting, and I work with smaller brushes generally, which is something a lot of people comment on, like, why are you using such tiny brushes? Well, I like to. Oh, I didn't mention, but if you see up there in the corner, I have a little shell that's got gal kit in it. I'm just kind of using it in tiny little amounts to add in with the paint. I didn't bother mixing it with anything. No Gamsol added, just straight up gal kit, kind of like I do in my sketchbook. And that is a medium that's going to help it dry faster so I can work on more layers. So there you saw me attempting to get into that alizarin crimson, which is completely dried. So I need to refill it, of course. So now that I have fresh alizarin crimson on my palette, I'm just going to go in with that color and add some titanium white. And I just placed that alizarin crimson into some of the lip color because it already has the other colors I need. I just needed to make it slightly more magenta, I guess. And I'm just filling in the lips. This is kind of like a makeup tutorial now. So again, like, I'm using the same colors as I did on the face on the hands. In this particular reference, they were very close. I think the hands are maybe like a little bit warmer and redder, like the fingertips, but overall, all the same, like all the colors I put on my palette end up intertwining with each other, which you start to see gradually as they come together. So now going back to the hands, I'm just trying to fill in some space, but then I kept getting distracted. Like, I'm going to do some paint on the hands, but then I'm going to switch to the face and the reflection. Yeah, that's just how I paint, you guys. Like, if you've been around for a while, you probably already know this. Like, you just know how sporadic my process is and how distracted I get. But so I'm taking some titanium white and I'm just creating a much lighter color here for this chin highlight, which the chin was looking so wonky for a while. Like, it was not at all what I needed, and it's gonna keep looking wonky. I mean, honestly, at this point, after I've been further into the painting, as I record this narration, it still looks wonky, but better than before, which is fine. Again, like, I'll, change the position of how I hold the painting, and I'll be able to change things and add things and correct little imperfections and things that look disproportionate. Going back to the lips now, I added some shadows. I'm just adding, like, I guess there is a little bit of Gamsol with the gal kid because it's right there and I've periodically dipped my brush into it. I just didn't mix the mediums together. So I took some burnt umber, and there's like a little bit of that color off in the corner there. And it kind of cut out, but I started to apply the darker tones like you can see in the lip. It definitely made a big difference, but it's not quite what it needs to be. Like, it still looks very stylized and cartoony, like the mouth at least. So once I fade those colors in and kind of create those shadow transitions more, it will look better. So for the color in the hair, it was dark and you couldn't tell, but I used burnt umber, phthalo emerald, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of ivory black. And I'm just creating this color of the hair, which isn't actually like a completely black shadow. It's a little bit on the greenish side, which you'll see it starts to transition to, and as I add a little bit of white to it, it does look much, much better. But just trying to get some of that dark area covered, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's like not that complicated. The shadows under the chin, under the jaw, I guess, are much darker, so they're not really hitting the light source. The hair is blocking them from the light source. I just added some phthalo emerald to that color there, but they're a little bit lighter, so you'll see me do that as well in a little bit. And unfortunately, my canvas paper is warped, but much like the house painting tutorial I recently did, or demonstration I suppose is a more accurate term, it does correct itself. So as you lay on more paint onto the little canvas paper, it does like flatten out and look much better. So at this point, some of my palette is gonna look a little bit hidden because I shifted it. The light was reflecting super weirdly. At this point, I'm just cleaning out my brush, and for whatever reason, I did that only to dip it back into the color that I originally had it in. Cool. I added some phthalo emerald and ultramarine blue to that color. Now I'm just continuing on with the hair. Just trying to outline that mirror and the hand, like the fingertips. And sometimes I go in with my actual hand on the painting, which I don't like doing. I don't know why I keep doing that, but like, you know, sometimes weird stuff gets on the painting, like little pieces of dried paint, because I use dried palettes. Good job, Lena. So adding more phthalo emerald there. Just building some more on the shadow under the jawline. There's little bits of the... Actually, no, that's a reflection. I thought I was like titanium white there, but that's just the light reflecting off of it. So I'm just going to speed this up a little bit so that it's not as boring, because this part is really nothing happening. I'm just using the same color. So now I'm adding some phthalo emerald into that dark shadow color along with some of the lighter browns I made for the colors on the lips and the shadows on the chin, and I'm placing that color under the jaw, and this is where there's more shadow. And I did edit this reference to have slightly like bits of green in the shadows in the curves in Photoshop. I often like to do this. It kind of has this film type effect, like a film filter, like cross-processing. If you Google that, you'll see some extreme colors, but I'm not really going that far. I'm just trying to get like a similar feel or vibe or whatever. It's hard for me to explain, but most of the time when I edit my references, I try and get little bits of like green colors in the shadow. I just really enjoy painting them, and I think it adds a lot of like atmosphere to a painting to have these shadows. It makes them more like a little more interesting, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm just filling in some of those parts in the neck, which it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now as I'm working on it, but once we get all the first color layer done, it will look so much better and it will make more sense, I promise. So just trying to like fade that in with some of the darker shadow color, and then just going to the bottom of the hair. And then there's like a little faint wrist. There's like, it's kind of blurry, but like under the hand, obviously, like it's not just floating in midair. There's just like tiny little evidence of a wrist there, which I will also paint, but I'm just trying to get some of those colors filled in. And then I'm painting some of the shadowy hand parts, which also have more greens in them. This was honestly challenging. This is where references come in super handy. It's like, even if you're super good at painting hands, when you paint positions like this, like it really helps to be able to see all the weird like angles of the folds on your palm, and just there's so many little intricacies, and it just helps to get things more accurate. This hand is just really hard to paint because like look at that top like index finger or pointer, right? That's the index finger. I don't know, I don't use like that terminology to describe hands normally, but do you see how weird looking and warped that is? Like that's gonna be hard to fix, and I'm not looking forward to that, but it's okay. Also, you saw me paint like it looks like a nostril, but it's not. I just put a little dark color there because it was there from a water droplet. So it's actually a distorted reflection of one of the shadows. It just looks like a deformed nostril, but it's not. It'll make so much more sense. I have to keep saying that to myself. Like I have to justify the mess that is my painting right now, because yeah. So going, back and forth between different sections of the shadow and just trying to fill it in, and also trying to get this outline of the mirror. The mirror that I used for this reference is actually from like a little makeup palette thing I had. I forgot what specifically it was. I just remember it kind of came off, and I had this idea like, what if I paint the reflection of it? Like, it's so spontaneous, but I love how that happens sometimes. Like, you just get ideas of what you want to do out of nowhere in the most unexpected places. Like, I never thought that I'd have any interest in painting a broken off mirror off of a palette, like a makeup palette, but here we are. So, to paint some of these shadows, like on the inner hand, I used very similar colors to what was on the neck, but I did add some more browns to them because the palm of the hands tend to be a lot more warm toned than the rest of the body. Your hands have like more of a pink tone, like I guess the palms of your hands, I mean. So there's definitely little bits of, warm colors in that shadow area, but because it's so dark, it's not in the form of like bright red, it's brownish. So there's like dark green and dark brownish. I hope I am making sense. So then I brought in some of the more red tones and just trying to create this like transition there between the shadow and the lighter colors. It's such a weird hand position to paint. It's like uncomfortable to paint, but it is a challenge, and it's good. It like helps you build your skills and develop and grow as an artist, and that's always great. So I'm taking some of those green tones I created with a lot of the phthalo emerald, and I brought it into the pinks from the colors of the lips, and then back to the shadow colors on the chin, like with the red. And I'm just adding more to the shadows on the hands with that. They're not all just going to be dark green. There's definitely going to be some warm colors as well. And the hair. The hair isn't just black. Like, there's going to be more detail to it with like individual strands and whatnot. So I'm going to try to highlight as much of this process as I can in real time without speeding too much up. So there's going to be more parts to this, probably like a final detail part, but hopefully I can demonstrate as much as I can, which is so much easier to do when you have a much smaller painting to work with, because all the detail, like all the steps are easier because they're faster, as opposed to like giant paintings. You have so much to try and articulate, which is very difficult for me to do. And I'm hoping that, with more examples on smaller paintings, smaller surfaces, I'll be able to demonstrate my process more in detail, and hopefully that helps you guys, or is just interesting or relaxing to watch, whatever it is. So here we go. I'm painting that little wrist area that I was talking about, and I basically use the same colors on the lips. I just kind of added some cadmium red and cadmium lemon to that. It's more of a brighter orangey color, just the way that color looked there after I edited it. So, and then I'm bringing that color into some parts of the fingers, like under them, I suppose, like transitioning from the shadow colors. Eventually I get frustrated with the hand and I kind of abandon it and focus on other parts and then come back to it. So that is part 1, and in part 2 we're gonna finish off the rest of this painting and get more surface area covered. So stay tuned for that.